Dan Wolken caught my attention, USA Today national columnist, and now he doesn't pick the headline, by the way. Just an FYI, the writers don't pick their headline. Opinion, it's time for NCAA to make the right call, tough call, and cancel March Madness. And Dan joins us now. When did you start thinking about March Madness being canceled?
I started thinking about it yesterday when the Ivy League tournament was canceled. We saw a number of colleges basically go online only and send kids home, talking to administrators and frankly just asking a question, which I asked at the top of the story. What happens if a player tests positive for coronavirus? What happens, even I'm going to Tampa next week. I'm supposed to go cover that regional in Tampa. Let's say, Florida State plays Arkansas Little Rock in the first round, and Florida State wins and advances, and they're going to the Sweet 16, and then 4 or 5 days later, it comes out that one of the Arkansas Little Rock players tests positive for coronavirus. Well, the way we're doing this now, congressmen who were in the same room as somebody at a convention are in quarantine. Our office today, reporters who were at a conference convention with people who test positive for coronavirus, they're in quarantine, and everyone in our office is pretty much working from home. That's what's happening in this country. So unless you can answer what happens if a player tests positive, which does not seem that far-fetched to me, or coach or game official or whoever, then I don't know if we really should be having this tournament at all.
How much of this, and maybe it's rhetorical, is based off money and the potential for lawsuits? Well,
there's a couple things, and I don't think any of us are privy to the details of what is in the CBS contract with the NCAA and what kind of insurance implications there might be if something like this impacted the NCAA tournament. But obviously there's financial considerations involved on all sides. Frankly, I think these conference tournaments, the SEC, the ACC, Big Ten, Pac-12, acting as if nothing is happening right now, I think they're being deeply irresponsible in holding their tournaments this weekend with fans in the stadium. That just doesn't seem very smart. I mean, look at the SEC, Dan. Vanderbilt University is basically shut down. Everyone's been sent home. Yeah. They're holding the SEC tournament a mile from Vanderbilt's campus with players from Vanderbilt involved in the tournament. So given just how little we know about the virus and how bad it's going to get, I think these decisions need to take a much wider view here than just money.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out what is the next step because, right. When I saw the Ivy League canceled its tournament, that's not a big revenue, a moneymaker there, and it's 4 schools that were affected by this. But then Yale is going to go to March Madness, so you couldn't have Yale play in a game in its conference tournament, but the NCAA, Yale doesn't have any jurisdiction over this to say you can't go. I'm confused about this. It feels a little hypocritical that they can't play in that tournament, but they can play in this tournament.
Yeah, and there's other teams at some of these Ivy League schools who are going and playing games. I think the rationale is that there's a certain critical mass where the number of people in a gathering, you have, 10 men's and women's teams and all the staff and all that in one place, that constitutes a risk to those campuses. And so I sort of understand that versus, one team playing one team, if that's the rationale they're going to use. But again, like all these NCAA tournament sites next week, and this is, I think, just not what is being talked about nearly enough. The fans is one thing, and frankly, at this point, I'd be a little surprised if they are going to allow fans in these stadiums, at least for next week. But all these different sites are going to have 8 different teams. That's a lot of people in one building, just kind of given what we know about the spread of this thing. So I just think there's not enough attention being paid to that. And the players, again, what happens if a player gets this? What kind of risk does that present to the NCAA?
Can we be overly cautious in a situation like this?
Well, look, I think it's a tough thing to balance overreacting and underreacting. The fear I have, I shouldn't say fear, the calculation that in my mind makes it make sense to me to delay or cancel these big sporting events is because we just don't have testing readily available in the country right now. We don't know how many people have it. We don't know what the growth rate is. So there's a good chance we could be looking up in a week and this thing has spiraled in terms of numbers of infections, numbers of clusters, different cities. I mean, who knows what that's going to look like? So there has to be a point where if that gets bad enough that you have to take drastic steps as a country to control this, to slow the spread of this, like Italy, right? That's what's happened in Italy, just so that their society could function, so that their healthcare system could deal with the strain of a lot of very sick people. You know, even if a young, healthy person would not necessarily be at risk. So I mean, there's just so many things that I think it's tough for us to wrap our minds around because it hasn't hit us like that yet.
Best guess on what you think happens to the NCAA tournament?
Yeah, again, and this what I say right now could be different in 3 hours or 10 hours or 24 hours. But I would say it's going to be difficult for the NCAA to put this tournament on next week with fans in the stadiums. What if there's a step beyond that? We'll see. I don't know that they have to make that decision today, but they need to make it soon. And the tone of their statement yesterday afternoon certainly indicated that big and tough decisions could be coming.
Dan, thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's Dan Wolken, USA Today national columnist, saying it's time for the NCAA to make the right call, tough call, cancel March Madness.